Skyscraper is a new action film from director Rawson Marshall Thurber. He also wrote this film. It stars Dwayne Johnson as the character of Will Sawyer, who used to be in the Special Forces, but after an incident and losing his leg, he decides to not work for them anymore. He now works for this very small security assessor company, and he's hired by this really huge corporation that built this tower called the Pearl. It's the tallest tower ever made. It's taller than the Burj Khalifa, in fact, and the security is just so sublime, it's so technologically advanced. People are gonna love it when the residential areas are open to the public. Only Will Sawyer's family is there for now, and it's just so hard to imagine that this tower could have any problems whatsoever. Except for when a terrorist group comes after the main businessman who built the tower, catches flames to it just to drive him out, but Will Sawyer realizes while everyone is evacuating, his family is still in the tower and they're above the fire line, so he has to get back in there to save them and stop the terrorists. I was worried for this movie because Rawson Marshall Thurber, I like Dodgeball, I even like Central Intelligence, and even We're the Millers I think is a decent movie. I'm a somewhat fan of what he does with comedy, so I was interested to see what he could do with the action thriller route. Obviously there's going to be some comedy here and there, but this is definitely taking itself a little bit more seriously. But I was wondering if Rawson was going to be able to handle that in a good way. I was also wondering if Dwayne Johnson's character was going to differentiate from past characters in any way. So I was interested in this movie, but at the same time I kind of held in the back of my mind this could end up being a huge pile of crap, so maybe don't be too excited for it. And surprisingly enough, I walked out of this movie feeling kind of the same way I felt about Rampage, the other Dwayne Johnson movie that came out like 3 months ago. It's a perfectly fine guilty pleasure of a movie. It has a ton of issues, but there's some things to like about it. Now, whether you want to discuss this is a bad route for Dwayne Johnson to go on, he's only making guilty pleasure kind of movies that you can enjoy, but they're just undeniably bad in a lot of ways. You can talk for days about how you want Dwayne Johnson to spend his career, but this is just what he's gonna do at the end of the day. And I'll give him credit, he is very good in this movie. He does a good job playing this character. He's likable like we all know that he can be. I like what they do with this character too, like he's not just the ultimate badass character. He gets beat a lot in this movie. Like the first action scene in the movie, it's like a hand-to-hand fight in this apartment, and it's kind of brutal, and Dwayne Johnson gets knocked around quite a bit. Instantly you learn from that action scene, he is a human being. He's not superhuman Dwayne Johnson. Like he is literally a guy who lost his leg, and he's very weakened because of that. Like you see that. And I like that touch, that Dwayne Johnson can actually be punched in the face and he can be taken aback by it. Like that's something that I really enjoyed seeing. I also really enjoyed the family dynamic in this movie. This is a very sweet family, very adoring family. They set him up very well, so when Will Sawyer has to get into the tower later, you aren't questioning like, oh come on man, can't you just assume they're dead or something? Like no, he wants to save his family. There's still a chance. He wants to get in there right away. And also Neve Campbell is just a badass in general. I was hoping, please, don't make Neve Campbell, of all people, just a side character to have Dwayne Johnson save them. Like, she actually has a couple moments where she has to think quick on her feet and actually maybe get into the action bits, and she's very good. Like, I really liked her in this movie. But of course, what else would you expect from the main protagonist of the Scream series? Neve Campbell is just a badass in many ways, and I'm glad that they utilized that in the film and she wasn't just a screaming damsel in distress. Other than those characters, though, I didn't really care for anyone else, especially the bad guys. They all suck. There's like one side villain that shows up and you think, okay, this woman is probably gonna have like something to do, like she seems like really badass. Her line delivery is a little off, but let's see what she can do. Maybe she can go hand to hand with Dwayne Johnson. We don't know yet. After a while, she kind of disappears for the majority of the movie and only shows up for like the last 10 minutes, so they completely wasted whatever potential they had with her fighting skills. I wish I could say that Noah Taylor being the villain was a surprise and a big spoiler, but it's not. You just listen to the way he talks and you look at the way he like shifts his eyes and it's like, you're the bad guy. And it's so obvious. Like, how is no one calling you out for that? And then later they reveal, yeah, I'm the bad guy, I'm the British bad guy. Like, really, dude? We saw this coming a mile away. How no one called you out on that before, I don't know, because you act so suspicious in every scene. There's also another surprise villain that through his opening scene, I was like, yeah, you're you're the bad guy. I know. It's so obvious it hurts. There's just so much obvious foreshadowing going on in this film, whether it be with the characters and later becoming villains. Basically, the entire setup for the third act. At one point, the guy who made the tower takes Dwayne Johnson to the big globe on the top, and you see how they utilize the frames to like make it seem like they're above the clouds and everything, how these mirrors will come up at some point, and it just makes you realize like, okay, this scene is only in the movie because you need a third act. And I was trying to think also, like, what's the point of having this huge globe at the top of the tower? Like, what's its use besides this mirror maze and being able to see below you? And I realized what the purpose of that place was. It was to have the third act. Like, there's really no good reason as to why they need this here. Just so they just needed it for the third act. It's bad enough that the side villains were wasted and you can call out if they were going to become a surprise villain. It's bad enough that there's so much obvious foreshadowing going on, certain lines that are said at one point that come back later on, but there's also the main bad guy, right? Whose main plot is the dumbest thing I think I've ever heard. Okay, maybe not the dumbest thing I've ever heard, but it made me think of the concept of this film, what everyone's been comparing it to. It's like Die Hard meets the Towering Inferno, and it just made me realize, like, yeah, but if the Towering Inferno element wasn't in this movie, it would just be a Die Hard remake, basically. And I can see why they had that Towering Inferno element now, because they don't want to remake Die Hard. They don't want that stigma going around, so now the building's on fire and there's terrorists. So Die Hard and Towering Inferno. Only thing is, though, the terrorists catch fire to this building so that the main guy, whatever his name is, I don't know, honestly, has no character. He grabs like this disc that has a bunch of investors' names or whatever, and the bad guy wants that drive. And it just made me think, okay, so you thought catching fire to the building would make this guy go get this drive so you don't have to go into a safe and get it. So you make the building catch on fire just for that, but you already have a guy on the inside. You have a few guys on the inside. Wouldn't it just be easier to come in, have someone open the big locked door of the office so you can come in and take hostage of everyone and be like, hey, I'm gonna shoot all these people if you don't give me the drive? Wouldn't it be easier if you just did that, and then once you get the drive, just start to get out? Why do you have to make the building catch on fire to do that? You already have people on the inside who can let you into the big locked doors, and that way it's easier. You don't need to catch the building on fire. You don't need to cause a big scene where the police are lining up outside. You can just have someone let you in, grab what you need, and then quickly get out. The Towering Inferno element makes the movie even stupider, but it's there so you don't call it a Die Hard remake. It's the dumbest thing! And I was sitting there in the theater, right? And I was listening to them explaining the plot, like why they wanted to do this, and I was thinking, am I the only one who sees how dumb this is? And they're taking it so seriously? I'd give the movie Rampage a little bit more of a pass on all of its dumb stuff, because I had a lot of fun with that movie, and that movie seemed to be a little bit more self-aware of what it was. Like, yeah, it's about giant monsters punching the frick out of a bunch of cities. Like, what do you want? So I was like, okay, I can accept a lot of the dumb stuff that happens in that one. There's a little bit more of a fluffy tone going on. Skyscraper, I want to just call this just it's dumb, but I had a really great time with it. But, and I did, there's a lot of great things in this movie action-wise, but it takes itself so seriously that it made me think, do you guys actually think this is smart? I'm sure I can't be the only one who sees this, right? There is some fun to be had with this movie. The action sequences are very well done. The first action scene with Dwayne, like I mentioned earlier, very tense and very well done. There's some stuff with Neve Campbell and survival stuff going on there that had me on the edge, honestly. And of course, even though it's impossible for Dwayne Johnson to climb this super crane in the matter of like 20 minutes, that scene was also very well done. And I also think when he's climbing out on the building to do some work on the turbines, I'll basically leave it at that. Like, I thought that was also very suspenseful. Like, anything to do with heights, I was in suspense with. It could just be my natural fear of heights, but I think they did a very good job. There's definitely a few moments where you can tell, like, green screen. Not real, you're not risking your life. But for the most part, I was able to kind of forget about that, and I saw like a real backdrop. I was like, okay, I wasn't taken out by the green screen that much, like a Rampage. So I thought they did a good job with Dwayne Johnson's character. I thought Neve Campbell is great, like she always is. The family dynamic is there, and it's good, and the action sequences are quite surprisingly suspenseful and very effective despite a few green screen moments here and there. And the tower itself also looks very well done CG-wise. It's just the main villains. They're so dumb, but everyone takes them so seriously. The plot is so dumb, but people take it seriously. The main corporation guy basically has no character, and for the first half of the movie, he's just kind of calm about everything, like, oh, the building's on fire? Oh, that sucks. Alright, I guess we should leave, or whatever. Like, it seems like he doesn't really care, but then later as the movie progresses, you can see him care a little bit more, but at the same time, I wasn't fully invested with his character at all. Like, they didn't do anything to make me care. They just revealed his story of the tower, and they expected, like, oh, you like this character now because he's speaking, basically. The cop characters, oh my god, they are so inept. It literally takes someone who's not a cop to come in and explain to them, like, hey, what are you doing? Your job should be this, and it's so obvious what's going on. And then they're like, yeah, maybe you're right. Like, for the first half, for no reason, they start to accuse Dwayne Johnson of being in on it. And it makes no sense. And literally, it takes another character to come in and be like, are you stupid? Like, are you guys actually stupid? Like, no, here's what's actually going on. Do your jobs, cops. They're just so weak. If you want to make a comparison to Die Hard really quickly, at least there's that one cop in Die Hard who helped Bruce Willis out. In this one, no cop is helping Dwayne Johnson out for the most part. They're just accusing him of being in on it right off the bat. So there's fun to be had with the action sequences. Surprisingly effective, well-directed. Third act is very good too. The family dynamic is also very good. Villains suck. Plot is dumb. The main villain plot is dumb. Lines of dialogue that don't need to be said are said, and it's really cringy. Some of it is pretty funny, and then some of it isn't that funny. Like, you just didn't need to write it. Like, moments where characters are just alone, and they start speaking, and it's like, you didn't need to do that. It's not handled the way Bruce Willis did it in Die Hard, where he's talking to himself so he can stay sane. It's just, you're saying it just because you wanted them to say this line. Oh my god, there's a line... I want to mention this so bad. There's a line in this movie that is ripped straight out of San Andreas. And the thing is, I can't, okay, you know what? Spoiler alert. I'm not gonna say, like, what the context of the movie is, but you can kind of guess what it is. But basically, someone asks a character, like, what are you gonna do now? And they're like, rebuild. And I was like, bro, that is straight out of San Andreas when Alexandra Daddario or whoever asked Dwayne Johnson, what are we gonna do now? And he's like, rebuild. Like, oh my god! I bet they didn't even know that was from a Dwayne Johnson movie. I bet they just thought that was a good line to end the movie on. But it's not. It's so cheesy, and it makes it worse that it's already in another cheesy Dwayne Johnson movie. I'm gonna give Skyscraper a C+. Besides its really effective action sequences and a good family dynamic and some good acting from the main family, I did not buy into any of the other characters, especially the villains, especially the main corporate guy, and especially the police. They're so terribly written, in my opinion. I didn't think a lot of the obvious foreshadowing was clever. I think it was just so obvious. There are humorous lines of dialogue I thought were funny, but then I didn't think were that funny, didn't need to be said. You just wanted it in there because you needed Dwayne to say something funny in the moment for some reason. And overall, it is just basically a derivative Die Hard film. They just didn't want to remake Die Hard because they knew they'd get controversy, so they were like, oh, what's another Tower movie? Towering Inferno? Yeah, let's make it a disaster movie with the terrorist plot as well. Perfect, except it makes the movie dumber, so... What are you gonna do? It's Dwayne Johnson. It's another C+ Dwayne Johnson movie for the year. Perfect! But if you've seen Skyscraper, leave in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.